Attacks on shipping can occur anywhere on the waters of the world. No vessel is safe, from small craft hugging the islands and estuaries of coastal waters to large merchant vessels and warships crossing the vast oceanic expanse. Aircraft capable of destroying surface ships cover the whole spectrum of aviation size and performance. Multi-engine maritime patrol craft and bombers can make their attacks in mid-ocean, often thousands of miles from their home base. Aircraft carriers and small warships can deploy weapons as diverse as supersonic fighter bombers and shipborne helicopters anywhere in the world. Similar aircraft can operate from coastal bases to make home waters equally dangerous for enemy shipping. Two-thirds of the Earth's surface is covered with water. Seaborne trade fuels the world's economy. Maritime shipping accounts for over 90% of the world's oil, foodstuffs, and raw materials for industry. The majority of finished products, like cars, are sent by ship. From the oil fields of the North Sea to the myriad islands that make up states like Indonesia and the Philippines, the maritime parameters are assuming an ever-increasing importance. Naval air power has a long history. In 1920 and 21, General Billy Mitchell said the battleship now had a rival. His pilots demonstrated for the world what air power could do to shipping. In military tests, Mitchell's pilots sank captured German dreadnoughts in a series of old battleships to prove that air power's reach over the ocean was more expansive, faster, and could strike with more power and force than naval guns of any sort. The world listened, and the aircraft carrier was born. By World War II, the carrier-borne strike force had replaced the battleship and its big guns as the queen of the seas, and was now the primary anti-ship weapon. The Japanese certainly knew the power of aircraft at sea. They creamed Pearl Harbor with it and opened the war in the Pacific. The Imperial Japanese Navy launched a surprise attack with wave after wave of torpedo and dive bombers on the U.S. base, and completed the near-total destruction of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. The surprise attack laid waste to most of the U.S. fleet as it lay at anchor at Pearl. Three days later, Japanese planes sank the British battleships the Prince of Wales and Repulse. For an uncomfortable length of time, the Pacific became a Japanese lake. But America recovered fast, and in great battles at Midway and Leyte Gulf, swept the Japanese Navy from the seas with carrier-borne air power. In the European theater, Mosquitoes, Bullfighters, and Typhoon fighter bombers proved particularly adept at hitting maritime targets. Germany's Stukas were also very successful Allied shipping destroyers. But the Luftwaffe's greatest influence was the development of the anti-ship missile. Launched by medium bombers, television-guided missiles like the Henschel HS-2938 devastated Allied shipping towards the end of the war. The HS-298 was a follow-on development. During the Cold War, the biggest threat to world trade came from the Soviet Navy. The Soviets maintained the world's largest anti-shipping force with large numbers of guns and missile-armed warships. NATO's great fear was that Soviet missile attacks would take out America's carrier battle groups, leaving the vital Atlantic convoy routes unprotected. That meant Soviet strikes from many directions simultaneously offered Soviet naval aviation the best opportunity of fulfilling its key task. The Soviets were pioneers in the development of anti-ship missiles, both air and ship-launched. Huge fleets of Badger, Bear, and Backfire bombers were kept on alert, ready to strike at Western surface ships and merchant vessels. Tupolev Bears were tasked with locating American ships. These long-range bombers could cover most of the world's oceans. Penetrating defenses at high or low levels, Bears would try to acquire the targets with their large spanning radars, coordinating the strikes with surface and submarine missile attacks. The aim was to divert the carrier's outer defenses and overwhelm the inner, hopefully by massed bomber attack. Carrier-based and vertical takeoff fighter forces could also be used to find targets, which would then be engaged by massive air-to-surface missiles. Fighter interceptors patrol an outer defensive ring in a radius of 250 miles from the battle group. The Grumman F-14 Tomcat, armed with a long-range Phoenix missile, was developed specifically to deal with the anti-ship missile threat. Maritime strikes encompass a wide variety of aircraft types, from dedicated carrier-based aircraft to large maritime patrollers and helicopters. Most carry some form of anti-ship missile, which makes them the equal of any warship. The anti-ship mission is usually the primary task of dedicated carrier-borne strike aircraft. Over the years, this has included the British Buccaneer, carrying the Marcel and Sea Eagle missile. Designed in 1950, the Buccaneer served on land and sea until the 1990s. The Dassault Super Intendard serves aboard France's two existing carriers, Clemenceau and Foch, as well as with the air forces of Argentina and Iraq. Britain no longer has conventional carriers, but VTL Harriers, based on light, vertical, short takeoff and landing carriers, has proved more than equal to the task of maritime strikes. In the U.S. Navy, the long-serving Grumman A-6 Intruder is being replaced by new versions of the multi-role FA-18 Hornet. Land-based fighter bombers are also tasked with anti-ship missions. Britain, Germany, and Italy used the Panavia Tornado IDS in the role. Large maritime aircraft like the Lockheed P-3 Orion and the Dassault Brigadier patrol hundreds of thousands of square miles of the Atlantic. The P-3 was the first aircraft to be armed with Harpoon anti-ship missiles. Shipborne helicopters like the Westland Lynx and Sea King give destroyers and frigates significant anti-ship capabilities, and particularly useful in engaging missile-armed, fast attack aircraft. Larger helicopters like the Sea King and variants of the Puma have been used in combat against shipping. Even land-based helicopters like the lightweight OH-58 are also effective against ships. The anti-ship missile is the means by which small nations can challenge the world's great powers for control of local waters. The missile has an effect in one of three ways: by a mobility kill, by a weapons sensor kill, or by sinking targets. In a mobility kill, the missile destroys engines or causes such damage that the vessel can't move under its own power without risk of sinking. Weapons sensor kills are effective by directly hitting a target's weapons or sensors, destroying the enemy's offensive and defensive capability. Because they strike above the waterline, it's harder for a missile to ensure that a vessel is destroyed than it would be by a torpedo. But the detonation of a sufficiently large warhead will cause such catastrophic damage that the target ship has little or no chance of staying afloat. The Aerospatiale Exocet is one of the world's most successful anti-ship missiles. Recently modified for ship launching, it entered service in air-launched form in 1979. Since then, it has been sold to more than 16 nations. Exocet is designed to attack large warships and is the primary anti-ship weapon of the Dassault Super Incendiary. The missile has a range of between 30 and 60 miles, depending on the altitude of the launch aircraft. It has a 160-kilogram high-explosive warhead, powerful enough to sink small ships and severely damage larger ones. Exocet can be launched from helicopters large enough to carry the heavy missile. The pilot of the launch aircraft detects the target on his radar before firing the missile. Flying in a sea-skimming mode, the missile can home in on a ship-sized target with deadly accuracy. It can be detonated as it approaches the target by radar or contact fuse. Bigger than Exocet, the American ACM-84 Harpoon has been in service since 1977. Launched by surface vessels as well as aircraft, the Harpoon is a sea skimmer flying low over the water to evade detection by enemy radar. For ship launch, a solid rocket booster propels the missile to flying speed before its turbojet engine takes over. The air-launch variant doesn't need the rocket booster because its launch platform is already in flight. Harpoons can also be launched from submerged submarines. Target data is fed into the computer before launch, and in the first phase of flight uses an inertial guidance system to fly to the general target area. Once there, its own onboard engine and pre-programmed computer turns on to hunt down its particular target. The Harpoon's Texas Instruments radar can be set for small, medium, or large acquisition windows, giving it a better chance to hit a well-defined target. The missile can be programmed to fly a roundabout course to avoid giving away the position of its launch platform. Sea and air-launched harpoons can be used in simultaneous attack against one or more targets, and even can be programmed to avoid certain terrain features like islands. There are a number of other highly effective weapons currently in service, like the British Aerospace Sea Eagle. The German French-built AS-34 Cormoran is similar in performance to the Exocet and is used by maritime strike tornadoes in Italy and Germany. The OTO Melara Automat is an Italian surface launch weapon which has not yet found an aircraft application. The lightweight British Aerospace Sea Skua has proved especially effective against fast, missile-armed patrol aircraft. Combat vessels need radar to survive and are thus vulnerable to anti-radiation weapons like the American ATM-88 Harm. The Harm is too small to really damage the ship's superstructure, but by taking out a vessel's radar eyes, it leaves the ship blind and vulnerable to missiles that can sink it. The U.S. Navy has found that the Maverick missile, designed originally as a tank killer, is also effective against ships. The U.S. Army's laser-guided Hellfire missile is ideal for taking out small, fast, and maneuverable targets. Although the ANS is no longer in development with Aerospatiale, this stealthy subsonic missile with exceptionally long range points to the future of anti-ship missile R&D. Anti-ship missiles first saw combat during the Arab-Israeli wars, but it was not until the Falklands conflict of 1982 that their devastating effects were revealed to the world. Argentina's seizure of the Falklands sparked an immediate and forceful reaction from the British, who mobilized a task force in record time to reclaim them. The greatest threats to the task force were Argentina's Air Force, equipped with the French-built Super Intendard and Exocet missile, and the Argentine Navy. The British had no idea or intelligence about the combat effectiveness of these entities and prepared for the worst. The only thing in the Argentine arsenal the British truly sweated was the Super Intendard and its accompanying Exocet missile. The Argentine pilots proved their bravery in low-level, almost suicidal attacks. But even with the Super Intendards outclassing the British Harriers as hardware standing alone, the Harriers swatted them down like flies. The Argentines, becoming more desperate as they saw the handwriting on the wall in terms of their war, pulled out the ace in their deck and shot off a couple of Exocets. The British didn't even have time to call the hand and lost it big time. 3 frigates were sunk almost immediately and many other warships damaged until the Argentines ran out of their small stock of Exocet missiles. Four years after the Falklands, the U.S. Navy went into action in the Mediterranean. Libya's Colonel Gaddafi and the U.S. Navy allowed a hitherto war of words over Libya's outrageous claim to sovereignty over international waters to escalate into a dust-up. Harpoon missiles were launched by A-6 intruders and took out a couple of his missile ships. It was the Harpoon's combat debut. As expected, the Soviet-supplied missile patrol boats were no match for a U.S. Navy carrier battle group. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, the conflict between Iraq and Iran had spilled over into the waters of the Persian Gulf. In May of 1987, the USS Stark was hit by an Iraqi missile. An accident, according to Baghdad. One exocet fired from a French-supplied Mirage was enough to severely cripple the American warship. The missile ripped a great hole in the side of the frigate, killing 37 of her crew. Exocet found more seaborne targets during the conflict. Iraq's threat to cut off Iranian oil exports led to the tanker war. Many were attacked, including some from neutral countries. Although serious damage was caused, few were actually sunk. The transports are so huge that it would take dozens of hits to send them to the bottom. But the damage caused by the missiles was a serious threat to world trade. British Lynxes armed with sea skuas were very effective against Iraq's Soviet-supplied fast missile craft and captured Kuwaiti patrol boats. Surface-hugging sea skuas carried by anti-sub helicopters like the Lynx can strike at surface targets up to 15 miles away.
We launched about 40 minutes ago from 100 miles downrange. We're on our way. Once everything's come up, then we position ourselves back to run in, identify the contacts, and then open fire as soon as we've got a positive. Now that's the electronic support measures. It's basically locked, how's locked, ready? Go on your beast, go on your beast. Take him. Come on.
The Iraqis had no defense against coalition air power, and in fast attack vessels detected on the water were immediately attacked by intruders, helicopters, and other air attack platforms armed with guns and rockets. Recent wars have shown the devastating effects of maritime strikes. Although the Cold War has ended, the threat to shipping remains high. Attacks on ocean-going vessels can come from anywhere. Whether a nation is at peace or whether it's at war, protecting sea lanes and communications links will always remain a high priority.